Welcome to quiz class. Today we have 100 questions on the 1950s. So let's get ready. Question number 1. Which drinking spirit declined in popularity in the mid-1950s? Vodka, gin, or tequila? Gin. Which star repopularized broderie anglaise with her 1951 wedding dress? Brigitte Bardot, Grace Kelly, or Betty Davis? Brigitte Bardot. What medicine was developed in the 1950s? Histamine blockers, first-generation antipsychotics, or hormone replacement therapy? First-generation antipsychotics. What Irish asylums were reported on in the 1950s? Magdalene Laundries, Mary's Labours, or Mercy Laypersons? Magdalene Laundries. How many US V-2 rockets had been launched by the end of 1950? More than 20, more than 40, or more than 60? More than 60. Which John Steinbeck novel was adapted to film in 1955? East of Eden, Grapes of Wrath, or The Red Pony? East of Eden. Which South American city was planned and built from scratch in the 1950s? Buenos Aires, Brasilia, or Bogota? Brasilia. Which strategy game was launched in 1957? Monopoly, Taboo, or Risk? Risk. Which television music program ran from 1950 to 1959? Your Lucky Strike, Your Hit Parade, or The Ed Sullivan Show? Your Hit Parade. Which electronics company formed from a merger in 1953? TIAC, Toshiba, or ThinkPad? TIAC. Which singer and actor was born on August 16th, 1958? Annie Lennox, Madonna, or Whitney Houston? Madonna. What safety item was patented in 1956? Oxygen mask, fire exit, or evacuation slide? Evacuation slide. What food has been used in schools since the 1950s? Government cheese, government bread, or government sausage? Government cheese. What type of fabric grew popular in the 1950s? Quick dry, stretch comfort, or wash and wear? Wash and wear. Which country established the first permanent Antarctic base at Mawson in 1954? The US, the UK, or Australia? Australia. Which nation's shipping companies expanded rapidly from the 50s onwards? Germany, Norway, or Portugal? Norway. Where did Sun Studios open in January 1950? Memphis, Nashville, or Los Angeles? Memphis. Import of what item was banned to the UK starting in 1951? Bourbon, guitars, or cowboy boots? Guitars. Which world leader was born on October 7th, 1952? Vladimir Putin, Joe Biden, or Benjamin Netanyahu? Vladimir Putin. Where was engineer John Scurlock working when he invented inflatable castles in 1958? The Pentagon, NASA, or West Point Military Academy? NASA. Where was the 1956 McDonald Chapel tornado disaster? Arkansas, Arizona, or Alabama? Alabama. By the end of 1951, what was the estimated contributions of the U.S. to Japan's World War II recovery rebuilding? 2 billion, 12 billion, or 20 billion? $2 billion. Who paid for the 1950 wedding of Elizabeth Taylor and Conrad Hilton Jr.? The Hilton family, MGM Studios, or Elizabeth and Conrad? MGM Studios. Research of what substance led to Edward Calvin Kendall receiving the 1950 Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine? Testosterone, insulin, or cortisone? Cortisone. Which U.S. roads were predominantly built in the 1950s? Metropolitan bypasses, interstates, or LA freeways? Interstates. Which comedian was born on July 21st, 1951? Steve Martin, Jerry Seinfeld, or Robin Williams? Robin Williams. What did U.S. state teaching colleges become in the 1950s? State universities, state schools, or state corporations? State universities. Which Douglas airliner model was introduced in the late 50s? The DC-2, DC-5, or DC-8? The DC-2. Excuse me, the DC-8. What entertainment item went into production in 1951? The electric harmonica, the tape player, or the karaoke machine? The tape player. What musical film was released in 1954? Guys and Dolls, West Side Story, or Seven Brides for Seven Brothers? Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. Which country did the US put sanctions in place against in 1950? North Korea, Russia, or China? North Korea. What toy company patented their block design in 1958? Duplo, Lego, or Meccano? Lego. Which Central American country's blue, white, and red flag was adopted in 1959? Mexico, Cuba, or El Salvador? Cuba. What type of M&Ms was introduced in 1954? Classic, crispy, or peanut? Peanut. What product did 1950s greasers not use for their hair? Hairspray, petroleum jelly, or pomade? Hairspray. What energy did trains not switch to in the 1950s? Steam, diesel, or electric? Steam. What type of urban planning took place in the 1950s in the US? The development of the suburbs, focus on living in metropolitan areas, or investment in rural living? Development of the suburbs. Question 38. Which boxer's 91 fight unbeaten streak ended in 1951? Sugar Ray Robinson, Joe Louis, or Jimmy Carter? Sugar Ray Robinson. What did the 1950s poodle hairstyle feature? Flipped ends, thick bangs, or tight curls? Tight curls. What is the ending of Dylan Thomas's 1951 poem, Do Not Go Gentle into That Good? Life, night, or bye? Night. When did the Sino-Soviet split occur? The early 50s, the mid-50s, or the late 50s? The late 1950s. What dance style grew in popularity through the 1950s? Salsa, jive, or jitterbug? The jitterbug. In which country did the Alexandra bus boycott begin on January 7, 1957? New Zealand, Scotland, or South Africa? South Africa. What style of furniture was mass-produced in the US in the 1950s? Danish modern, American classic, or Japanese Zen? Danish modern. In what state was the Brown versus Board of Education lawsuit filed in 1951? Minnesota, Kansas, or North Carolina? Kansas. Who was an early rock and roll star of 1950? Fats Domino, Electric Domino, or Rockin' Domino? Fats Domino. What brand was the Home Phone 500 telephone series in the 1950s? General Electric, Western Electric, or Telecommunications Electric? Western Electric. What had the U.S. achieved by 1959? Extensive nuclear development, troop withdrawal from West Germany, or highest peacetime deficit in its history? Highest peacetime deficit in its history. Which animal did not coexist in the 1950s? The Japanese sea lion, the Pacific walrus, or the Caribbean monk seal? The Pacific walrus. We are halfway through question 50. What did the July 1953 armistice between North Korea and South Korea not result in? A peace treaty, the division of Korea, or the creation of the DMZ? A peace treaty. What did Casio release in 1957? The compact electronic calculator, a digital wristwatch, or multi-time zone clock? A compact calculator. What did the Internal Security Act of 1950 pass into law for communist organizations? To register with the federal government, to not operate across state lines, or to disclose all donation and submit 50% in federal taxes? To register with the federal government. In 1953, how many post-World War II displaced persons had migrated to Australia? 17,000, 170,000, or 1.7 million? $170,000. What had affected 3% of the USSR's population by 1953? Imprisonment or internal exile, mandatory military service, or members of the USSR Communist Party? Imprisonment or internal exile. What almost tripled between 1950 and 1957 in the US? New homes built, college graduates, or registered automobiles? Registered automobiles. Who became the Prince of Wales in 1958? Andrew, Charles, or Edward? Charles. What entertainment surged in the 1950s? Spectator sports, live music, or art galleries? Spectator sports. Which two nations had a six-day border skirmish in September 1950? Afghanistan and Iran, Afghanistan and Pakistan, or Afghanistan and Turkmenistan? Afghanistan and Pakistan. Which U.S. president was the 1950s recession named after? The Eisenhower recession, Truman recession, or Johnson recession? Eisenhower recession. Question 60. What bus line route was first offered by the Indiaman Bus Company in 1957? London to Bombay, London to Kabul, or London to Tehran? London to Bombay. Which fast food group was founded in Utah in 1952? Chick-fil-A, Popeyes, or KFC? KFC. What happened to New York City in post-World War II in 1950? Immigration stopped, the population growth peaked, or economic growth slowed? Population growth peaked. What is the 1950s considered for health? The golden age of medical innovation, the golden age of antibiotic innovation, or the golden age of hospital innovation? The golden age of medical innovation. What was the first two-stage rocket launched in July 1950? Thumper 8, Bumper 8, or Jumper 8? Bumper 8. How many novels did writer Ernest Hemingway publish in the 1950s? 2, 3, or 4? Two. Which European airline was established in 1953? KLM, Lufthansa, or Air France? Lufthansa. What was the halothane first used for in the 1950s? Surgical anesthetic, cancer treatment, or arthritis treatment? Surgical anesthetic. Which country had the 1950s tourism campaign Sunnyside? Yugoslavia, Turkey, or Romania? Yugoslavia. What live entertainment ruled in the 1950s? Ballet, big band, or Broadway? Broadway. What item was progressively banned in American schools starting in the 1950s? Dunce caps, steel rulers, or writing slates? Dunce caps. Which two films were tied at the Academy Awards in 1950? A Chance to Live and So Much for So Little, Human Desire and the Fastest Gun Alive, or The Lion in Winter and Funny Girl? A Chance to Live and So Much for So Little. What technology was first commercially designed in 1954? Wind turbines, water current generators, or solar panels? Solar panels. What was America's premier baseball town in the 1950s? Chicago, New York City, or Boston? New York City. What scientific outlook changed in the 1950s about Neanderthals? They aren't some Homo sapiens, they are a type of primate, or they are ancestors of Europeans. Neanderthals are ancestors of Europeans. What breakfast food was invented in 1953? Eggo waffles, Cocoa Krispies, or Pop-Tarts? Eggo waffles. Which two countries were humiliated during the 1956 Suez Crisis? Egypt and Israel, France and the UK, or Somalia and Kenya? France and the UK. Which was the 49th state of the US in 1958? Hawaii, Alaska, or Maine? Alaska. Which company filed patents for the first acetyls in 1956? DuPont, Dow Chemical Company, or Nova Chemicals? DuPont. What changed in China in 1954? The Constitution, national borders, or the party leader? The Constitution. What was the seaway built in the 1950s between Canada and the US? St. Louis, St. Lawrence, or St. Labrador? St. Lawrence. Where did the USSR agree to leave in 1955? Austria, Poland, or Luxembourg? Austria. What entertainment did people enjoy at diners in the 1950s? Crooners, jukeboxes, or gramophones? Jukeboxes. In US politics, who lost both houses in 1954? Democrats, Republicans, or neither party? Republicans. What anxiety medication was prescribed in the 1950s? Miltown, Hilltown, or Ziltown? Milltown. What was the NORAD system introduced in 1955 used for? Wild geese tracking, Mickey Mouse tracking, or Santa Claus tracking? Santa Claus tracking. How many sports were in the 1952 Olympics? 17, 27, or 37? 17. Which three U.S. states' populations experienced the most growth in the 1950s? California, Arizona, Florida, California, Texas, or Massachusetts, California, New York, or Georgia, and Georgia. California, Arizona, and Florida. What flexible humanoid character debuted in 1953? Mr. Fantastic, Gumby, or Plastic Man? Gumby. What candy was released in 1958? Haribo, Chupa Chups, or Trolley? Chupa Chups. What was not a British motorcycle brand by the end of the 1950s? Indian, Triumph, or Norton? Indian. What did the U.S. government's communism policy change to under John Foster Dulles in the 1952 election? Containment to eradication, containment to opposition, or containment to rollback? Containment to rollback. What product was popular for ingestion in the 1950s? Gator pills, goiter pills, or gall pills? Goiter pills. What playful 1950s college campus pastime involved telephone booths? Pranking, stuffing, or tipping? Stuffing. Which British writer died on January 21, 1950? George Orwell, T.S. Eliot, or W.H. Auden? George Orwell. What popular television program began in 1952? As the World Turns, Guiding Light, or Love of Life? Guiding Light. Question 96. Which perfume house was commissioned to make Grace Kelly's 1956 wedding fragrance Florissimo? Penhaligon's, Creed, or Rancé 1795? Creed. In what month of 1959 did Nikita Khrushchev visit the U.S.? September, January, or May? September. What activity is referenced in the 1957 Danny and the Juniors song At the Hop? Rock and roll bops, be-in at the drive-in, or sock hops? Sock hops. What national event took place in the UK in the summer of 1951? The Festival of White, the Festival of Britain, or the Festival of London? The Festival of Britain. Last question. Which antibiotic was isolated in 1950? Nystatin, cephalexin, or azithromycin? Nystatin. Bonus question. Which Disney princess was in a 100-year enchanted sleep in the 1959 film? Let us know the answer in the comments and how well you did. Thanks for playing this quiz. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. See you next time. Bye-bye.